Welcome, everybody. And I wanted to just kind of kick it off. Each week, we talk a lot about different technologies. We bring in a lot of service providers like you have here today on this panel. And we want to thank you for joining and spending the time. Sometimes it's around your lunch hour, but the next normal is in the midst of everything going on. I think it's going to be a really good play for you to hear a little bit about today's message and maybe take from it some things you could take back to your either opportunity or your client or even your company in general. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host for today's roundtable, Ms. Sonia Moline. I want to give you guys a quick little background so that you understand the expanse of what Sonia has done over her career. She is a dynamic leader with extensive business continuity planning experience. She holds a deep passion for sharing the tools for success with others and can be found volunteering in her local community and participating in the mentoring program for the Alliance of Channel Women. Moline also founded the annual Techie Toy Drive, which collects and donates STEM toys directly to children in need. Previously a chief executive for business cloud services firm Effortless Office and founder of partnering compliance firm ComplyPro, she joins Technology Source with a passion for business improvement. Her IT career started when she was the IT director for several busy mid-size healthcare companies, including Physicians Data Trust and Center for Sight. While at these firms, she implemented extensive pandemic planning measures, which is a great fit for today. So these included virtualizing infrastructure and eliminating physical hardware such as servers, on-site phone systems, and computers to enable both on-site staff and the remote workforce. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Sonia Moline.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Sonia Moline here. Thank you everyone for joining. I still see people trickling in. We do have our chat box available. So if you want to say good morning, if you want to say hey, hi, whatever it is, it really helps us know you're here and you're ready to learn. And I wanted to also take a minute to just commend everyone who joined us today. I know there's a lot going on and I feel like things are just speeding up as we are starting to see businesses reopen. I've seen just a lot of success for our organization, and I'm seeing a lot of businesses who are able to figure out this next normal and work towards that. So I commend you for taking extra time in your day each week as we put on these virtual roundtables. And I also want to thank our panelists and Tom for taking the time this morning. So we will keep this as exciting as possible and try to pack as much information into it as we can. So welcome to the Technology Source Virtual Roundtable series. And today we're going to talk about the next normal. And a lot of the tools and services that we offer at Technology Source, which we'll talk about those in a second, many of them are not brand new. But what is new is that just in the past few months, the primary operating model for businesses was not necessarily remote working. And we'll talk about some of the statistics in a minute, but now it is. And while this has changed businesses for the temporary, a lot of them are also understanding the efficiency that can be gained by moving away from the office. So many of you know I was an IT director for many years, and I was a huge proponent of moving things off of local infrastructure. Things like hot desking, mobile infrastructure, getting the organization off of local computing devices and off of local phone systems. For me, it was efficiency, it was ease. To be honest, I could take a break and take vacations and not worry about this infrastructure sitting there having problems. But it was also about leaving this legacy for my company. And what I know now is that it's very gratifying to think back of all those systems that I set up in place that are now being utilized in a business continuity needs during the face of this pandemic. So let's just dig in. I wanted to share some information with you today, and we will get started. I'd also like to welcome Justin. Good morning, Justin. How are you?
Good morning, Sonia. I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I'm really feeling a lot better. I think things are looking up here. So it's been an interesting few months, but here we are, still on our mobile devices and working from home. And it's exciting in some ways also just to see how businesses are rebounding from things and utilizing a lot of the tools and services that we offer. I've got some great case studies on our website, and I'd like to get one about some of the stuff 8x8 is doing too soon.
Awesome. We'd love that.
Awesome. Well, a little bit about Technology Source, and then we'll get Justin to share some of his insights with us. We have been around for 20 plus years, and we're serving over 60 countries. We have over 200 service providers like 8x8, as well as some of the ones on this screen. We have over 3,500 active customers and over 200 different advisors and partners who work to help businesses, kind of like a technology matchmaking service to help them find the right services for their organization. So at Technology Source, you've seen our elements of business success. These include cybersecurity, business optimization, software and applications, connectivity, voice and communications, which we'll talk about today, marketing, mobility, which we'll talk about today, and then cloud and infrastructure, which we will also go into a little bit today. As you know, we've had to cancel a lot of events, but we've had some really great ones so far in the early part of the year. Upcoming next week, we do have cost savings. I couldn't fit it in on May, so I stuck it down there. We have a lot of events, if you haven't noticed, one a week. We have this new normal today, and then we have cost savings during a downturn next week with CenturyLink. So please do tune in for that event. We also have this week at 2 o'clock my time, but 4 o'clock Central Time, which is a little more reasonable, a virtual happy hour, and we'd like to invite everybody to that. There will be prizes and hopefully games, and we'll figure something out. We had a lot of fun on the West Coast one. It was actually pretty fun. We even had some music. Some people played some music, and Dom, our founder and president, he even DJ'd at the end, so it's pretty neat. So all right, let's jump right in. So most of us right now, the current state, we're working from home. Primarily, we're relying on business collaboration tools while we're working. Internet speeds are still high, and 73% of communication is still nonverbal, right? So regardless if you're just on the phone, you're only getting across 7% of the communication. Collectively, telecommuting saves $44 billion, and so again, I talked about those efficiencies that I was always looking for. Efficiencies not just in the work environment for the employees who are utilizing the tools, but also for the bottom line of the company, able to save money. And then 84% of these employees are on multiple teams, so we need to address how are they going to talk and work together. And then we'll continue to talk about planning for this recovery. I think that's an important thing because there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions out there. There's a lot of free offers, and organizations are kind of jumping into some of these things. But we want to make sure whatever organizations are selecting for their service providers, that these are going to things that are going to carry them through. So just a couple more things. Search volume for video conferencing has increased by 1,000%, and this was from 2019 to just right before the pandemic, and now it has doubled that. So it is a huge amount of people that are looking for video conferencing. Microsoft Teams has doubled in their usage since 2019. Zoom, I mentioned this because now it's a household name. You know, it's like grab me a Kleenex or let's go on a Zoom or something like that. But it's also a concern. So now everyone knows what it is, but there's also a lot of concern about the security with Zoom. And then there's also just Zoom is maybe kind of a one-size-fits-all, and there's a lot of organizations out there, which we'll talk about, that have other services and products that are kind of more enhanced for specifically the needs of the customer. 35% planned before the coronavirus to implement UCaaS in 2020. So that was a large number, but this has actually been met already by March. So organizations in March already hit that 35% mark. Pre-coronavirus, it was supposed to be 35% at the end of 2020. 30% of employees were working at home 1 or more days a week prior to the coronavirus. Now we have 81% of employees working from home. And then interesting here, and this is Gartner, 2/5 of these employees will continue to work from home after this is, after we recover. So continue to plan for the recovery. And then let's just talk about UCaaS for a second. So everybody knows Unified Communications as a Service. This is something you've probably maybe already been using. Go ahead, I'm just gonna poll the audience really quick. Who's already using Unified Communications or has helped one of their customers, because I know we have a lot of advisors on this call today too. Who's using Unified Communications? Just say yes or never, or not using it or used to use it. Just give us a little idea in the chat box here. I'm seeing, okay, a lot of yeses. Absolutely. Some people say, what is UCaaS? Good, good, all right. So it's kind of a varied audience. I'd say it's 90% of you are very familiar, and then there's a few that are really new. There's some that are using Teams That's good. That's good. So I see there are some questions about UCaaS. So unified communications, let's talk about what we want to help customers look for when we find the right unified communications platform for them. So we want to first look at the system that's provided. Now, does this system support your existing phones? Is it a hybrid of cloud and on-site? We want to talk about the different systems that are provided and what they do and what's right for that customer, depending on what they have and what they're looking for. The next thing we're going to want to talk about is the migration. Is it fast? Is it phased? A lot of times I'll see a phased migration happen so that they can test out some of the tools and features and services and benefits at a specific location before the customer deploys this at every single location, if they have multiple locations. And that could also be considered sort of a proof of concept. The next one is the features, right? It could have every feature under the sun, but if you don't need it and it's being, charged at a premium and you're not going to use it, we want to consider finding the right solution for you. And also on the other end of that, you might have specific things that you didn't even know you needed, but as soon as you see some of these really cool features, you're excited about them. And then stability and quality, that's going to be a no-brainer, right? We want to make sure that the system is working, that it's up, that it's functional, and it's easy to use. Great customer service. I think that is one of the most important things, because if it's not working, you just need it to work quickly, and you need somebody who's going to help you. And also make sure that the deployment is smooth, and make sure that the users get all the details around the system that they need. And then many channels, many connections. What about APIs, integration? So those are one of the things we're going to want to talk about. What applications are you living in all day long, and how is your UCaaS service going to bridge the connections there? Everyone's a contact center. We've talked about this on the last couple calls, and one of the things that I'm finding interesting is, and this was true for me too when I was an IT director, we by no means ran a contact center. However, we had 20 or so people answering the phone. So when I found specific contact center applications that could be layered on top, it made it so much easier to understand things like hold times, who's in the queue, a lot of other things that these contact center applications have. So considering your business, maybe you do want some of the features that come with these tools. And then security and compliance. Obviously, it needs to be addressed and talked about depending on the needs for each customer. And then last is business-friendly billing. I have definitely seen this be a make or break scenario. It's kind of neck and neck for the different providers that we've brought, but the business-friendly billing can be very important because you may have two separate bills for different locations, and so finding the providers that are able to offer those types of things. So those are just some of the things that we look for when we're looking for the right provider. But now I want to hand over my screen to Justin, but before I do that, I just wanted to ask you, Justin, where are you at today? Are you working from home or?
Yeah, so I live in Pennsylvania. I've actually been working from home for over a decade. So, it's kind of been, life is normal these past few months, at least from where I've been working.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. I have a lot of questions, and I'm probably going to save some of those towards the end, but please don't stop asking because it really helps us. But one of the things I did have for you is, what are some things right now that 8x8 is doing to help customers, current customers, potential customers? What are some of the things you guys are doing right now?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, the past 2 months have been, crazy for us as a business because a few things have happened, Sonia, and everybody's been living through it. So I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but a few things that we've had go on. Number one is, as everybody has gone home and looked for a way to connect, as you mentioned, we've all gone to video. And so for us, we've seen between 8x8 video meetings and Jitsi, which is our open source video platform that we offer as well, we're at over 20 million monthly active users. And I mean, that has just accelerated exponentially over these past 2 months. So as you can imagine, supporting those people, it's been everything from hospitals or schools in Italy to educators here in the United States. I mean, it's just been incredible stories of people looking for ways to come together. So for us, it's been able to partner with them and make sure that they get connected in a way that is secure, that is safe, that's without the threat of some of the things that we've heard about in the news. That's been priority number one for us. Beyond that, it's been these two things of people who were 8x8 customers who maybe had a large on-premise, part of their business, having to, in some cases overnight, move to work from home. Helping them scale that rapidly has been a big focus. And just in general, understanding what business continuity means today has been just a big project for us to help educate and equip people, even if that means, small businesses getting into the PPP loan program or whatever it would take.
That's great. I have another question that if you could just answer to get people on the right track. Can you explain what unified communications is, just so that a few people that are curious?
Yeah, and I'm even going to take it a step further. So 8x8 offers unified communications, but we also offer contact center, which you mentioned, and collaboration options. So for me, when I think about what 8x8 does in our cloud communications platform, it's a number of things. One, if we think about internally, the way that we connect as companies, we do that a couple ways. Number one is by picking up the phone, right? The very phone systems that we use is part of unified communication systems. The second component of that is the chat that we might be using to connect and collaborate. That's part of unified communications. We talk about video, right? That is part of unified communications. And then of course, contact center, our ability to interact with external customers, clients, prospects, things along those lines. And what's unique about 8x8 is we're the only provider who all of those things are offered on a single solution. Anybody else in the market, they're going to be using a combination of tools, but it's not all one tool.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about 8x8 and take it away. We're excited to hear from you.
Yeah, totally. And so my conversation today is really going to be rooted in my experience as someone who's been leading customer experience teams, is going to be kind of moving away from this idea of unified communications or even contact center. And it really is talking about what is the next normal when we look at customer experience professionals. And I think that this is an interesting conversation to be having right now, because for so many of us, we're trying to figure out what is normal. That's part of the reason why I stayed away from the idea of even new normal, because what's happening right now in a lot of ways is feels new, but we actually experience interruptions like this all of the time, never on the scale of what we're doing. And what I believe is that what's happening today is going to shape the way that things normalize over the coming months and even years. And so that's this idea of the next normal. And what I've encouraged is for people, after we have this conversation today, is if they want to learn more, if they want to ask questions, it's really easy to get a hold of me. And I'd encourage people just to reach out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share three things. The first thing I'm going to share is a story about a dear friend of mine and an unexpected experience that she had 2 years ago. From there, I want to share 6 lessons that I took after I heard her story, 6 lessons that I think are really, really important for those of us right now that are finding ourselves needing to lead in the midst of the unexpected. And then from that, I want to give everybody 4 steps that I believe are incredibly important as we move from where our organizations, where our contact centers or our customer experience or our unified communication teams, from where they are today, to get us to this place where we feel some sense of stability, where we do feel this sense of normalcy, because that's what we all crave. And I believe that's where we're all headed. And so I hope what I share today gets us a few steps closer to actually achieving that. So my friend Becca 2 years ago got engaged to the man of her dreams, Joey. And like any bride, she began the experience of planning for that big day. Now, Becca's one of those people that if you were to ask her, she would tell you that she really doesn't want a lot. She would tell you that for her, simple is often better. And she really doesn't have a lot of things that are extravagant expectations. But there was one thing that she wanted to have as part of her bachelorette experience. And in fact, there was one place that she wanted to go more than anything. And it was to take a trip to New York City to visit the scene of the movie that she has been in love with since she was a little girl. And that movie was Breakfast at Tiffany's. And maybe some of you here today are fans of the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. And if you've been a fan of the movie and never have gotten to go to Tiffany's, maybe you share that dream that Becca had. Maybe if you're not a fan of the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, you are a fan of that little blue box that can occasionally show up when someone places an order from Tiffany's. But I'll tell you what, even if you're not a fan of the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, if you're not a fan of the little blue box, what I hope is that the story and the lessons that I've learned from Becca's experience at Tiffany's make you a fan of what they've done to ensure that their people can lead in the midst of the unexpected. So here's where it all began. They finally had that day in August where they were taking the weekend trip to New York City, and they hopped in the car, drove the 3 hours from where we're at in Eastern Pennsylvania, got to New York, and had an incredible day visiting the sites. Got to later in the afternoon, probably about 30 minutes before Tiffany's was scheduled to close for the day, and she was finally able to walk into the doors, finally able to have that experience. She was so excited. She told me she got goosebumps the moment she walked through the door, just being able to be and experience this place that she had dreamed about for a really, really long time. Well, her and the girls in her bachelorette party had explored the store on the first level. They decided, you know what? We want to see what else Tiffany's had to offer. And so somewhere around 5:18 that evening, they hopped onto the elevator at Tiffany's. The attendant pressed the button, the doors closed, the elevator started to go up, and then went to a lurking halt. Now, here's where I jump into this story. I happened to be scrolling on Instagram, and at 5:23 that evening, I see this post go onto Becca's Instagram feed with the caption, "Stuck in a Tiffany's elevator on my bachelorette party, not how I saw today going." I can imagine that if I were in that situation, or if any of you have ever been stuck in an elevator, it's one of those kind of really unsettling circumstances. It's unsettling for a lot of reasons. Number one is we don't have control of the circumstance. Number two, depending on how far you are off the ground, right, we start playing all of these worst case scenarios in our head. And I've got to believe, even though they were smiling in this picture, that even after those 5 minutes of being stuck on the elevator, that they were a little bit unsettled. Now, I caught up with Becca after the fact, and she shared how the rest of the evening played out. And this is what happened. Somewhere around 5:38, they really started to get to know Melanie. Melanie was the elevator attendant, and as you can imagine, she wasn't planning to be stuck on this elevator with a bunch of bridesmaids either, but she did whatever she could to make them laugh, to engage them, to ask them questions, to reassure them, to just build a conversation. And Becca said that they really bonded with Melanie that day. But she did what I think any of us would do if we were in that situation: tried to have them focus on what they could control, try to alleviate an uncomfortable situation. And I've got to believe that right now, when many of us are in this place where we feel like we don't have control, where we feel uncertainty, where we feel fear, we're going to this place where we're trying to figure out how can we make sure that we put on the brave face, or how can we make sure that we communicate well, how can we make sure that we focus on things that are under our control. And I know that Becca and I know that Melanie, when they were in that elevator for about 20 minutes at this point, they were feeling like it's been a long time, but it's got to be ending sometime soon. Well, let's fast forward to about 2 hours later, when they were still stuck in that elevator, and they'd been having lots of conversations back and forth. At this point, there were lots of, there were all sorts of thoughts and feelings. And as you can imagine, it was not a great situation. And it was not the experience that Becca had dreamed about for all of those years. Now, this story could have ended that, by the way, they eventually got out of the elevator and everything was okay. It was a bummer that they had to have that experience, but hey, at least they're all safe. Tiffany's didn't stop there. As soon as the girls got off of the elevator, they made sure that everyone is okay. They said, "We've got to believe that you're hungry. It's after 7 p.m. now. You've been on that elevator for 2 hours. We would love for you to join us for dinner." And if you happen to know anything about Tiffany's, you happen to know there's a restaurant in Tiffany's known as the Blue Box Cafe. Blue Box Cafe is so popular. Reservations open 1 year in advance, and within moments, they're sold out. Well, they brought Becca and their girls up to the Blue Box Cafe, where they had it all to themselves. Now, keep in mind, Tiffany's had been closed for almost 2 hours at this point. But they took what little staff they had around. They'd been working these plans in the background to not just say, "Hey, we understand that you might be hungry, but let's make this experience a little bit better for you, and let's at least send you off with a meal." And so they pulled out all the stops and opened the Blue Box Cafe. But then they went beyond that, and they said, "You can't leave here without that little blue something." And so they made sure that every single one of the ladies in that bachelorette party had a little blue something. And then they put the icing on the cake, and they said, "Inside of this bag is a card for each of you. And at any time for the rest of your life, if you want to come back with a guest to the Blue Box Cafe, we will always have a table with your name on it." Now, Becca told me the story, and as someone who is a customer experience junkie, I got goosebumps, right? Because it was amazing to see an organization take an unexpected circumstance that wasn't, anything anybody wanted or had hoped for, and looked for ways to make sure that they not only addressed the needs that were in front of them, but they found a way to move past it and turn it into a positive experience. And so I wanted to step back from that story and talk about what are the 6 lessons that I learned on what each of us could be doing right now to be leading, not just in the unexpected circumstance that we find ourselves in, but all of the unexpected circumstances that our organizations will face as we move forward. Then I want to give you those 4 steps to get us on that path to the next normal for customer experience. So the first lesson that I got out of this experience with Tiffany's is that in any situation, especially the unexpected, open communication is the foundation to leading well. Open communication is about transparency with our teams and with the leaders that we work alongside. Open communication is about enabling people to connect easily. To making sure that no matter where people are at, that they have access and the ability to connect in the same way that they would as if none of these restrictions existed. So number 1 is this idea of open communication. The next thing that I discovered is that leaders are always on the watch for ways to serve the unset expectations. At no point did the girls say that we're starving, we're hungry. They had plans for dinner. They were planning to go do something different and exciting that evening. And Becca told me after the fact, they had secretly really wanted to get into the Blue Box, but they never got a reservation when they tried calling in. And so what the teams at Tiffany said is they didn't say that they were hungry, but we know that just was over the block of dinner. They've probably got to be hungry. So what can we do to watch for this unset expectation and serve it well? And so the question I ask many of us are, what are the unset expectations that we could be watching for today and looking for ways to serve them well? One of the things that I think is special about times like right now, times that are unexpected, is that they give us an opportunity to practice unconventional creativity. The team at Tiffany's could have easily put together some snacks from the cafe's kitchen into a bag and said, we're so sorry this happened. We know you're probably hungry. Have a good night. But they took the extra step to say, what would it mean to open up the Blue Box Cafe for these ladies? A friend of mine owns a restaurant and they have a chef's table, and it's one of the highlights of what they do. And right now they can't offer their chef's table. He took this as an opportunity to explore unconventional creativity, and they packaged up all of the items that they would use to prepare that dinner. And they offered people the opportunity to not only buy those ingredients from the restaurant, but to have a live video session where the chef gave them a personalized cooking demonstration and walked them through how to prepare that meal. And so I ask every single one of you, what is the opportunity for you to practice unconventional creativity in the way you think, the way you reinvent service? The next piece here is one of the things I've learned as someone who's been in customer experience and contact centers for a really long time, is one of the best ways to recover from any bad situation is by demonstrating outrageous generosity. And right now, this idea for recovery for a lot of us might seem something that is foreign. It might seem something that is far off, but there are opportunities right now for us to be on the steps to recovering from the current circumstances. And I didn't say to demonstrate outrageous expenses here. It's outrageous generosity. And so what would it mean for you? Maybe your organization isn't a place that for you, outrageous generosity is doing something to financially serve a part of your community or part of your employees. Maybe outrageous generosity is the idea of pulling together people to volunteer to pack meals for students who currently wouldn't be able to eat because they're not in school. Outrageous generosity can mean a lot of things, but one of the things that I've found time and time again is when we're in the midst of unexpected circumstances, one of the best things that we can do as leaders is to look for opportunities to demonstrate outrageous generosity. The next lesson that I didn't know that Tiffany's actually did this after the incident with Becca, but I believe that they did. And I know that I've done this in a number of experiences that have been unexpected for me. And it's embracing a curiosity, not just for learning from the past, but the present circumstances. And one of the challenges that I've put out to close friends who are leading customer experience or contact center communication operations today is to take time every single day to document what are the lessons that you're learning along the way. Because part of how we not only get through this current circumstance, but part of how we improve and iterate in the future for when things like this happen again, because they will happen again. How do we look for the lessons that we're learning in the moment to make those improvements and innovations along the way? And the last piece is that I know that Tiffany's had their elevator inspected. I know that they had contingency plans if different things would happen. And I know that you had disaster recovery or business continuity plans. And I know that every single one of us right now are in a place where we've realized some part or all of the plan failed. And the lesson that I want to leave with on this story is that the unexpected will happen again for every single one of us. We won't have a perfect plan. And that's okay. As long as we do these other things up front, we will have the best possible plan we could have had. And when we take the opportunity then to learn and iterate from that next experience that happens, the plan will only get better. And that's all that we can expect. And so what are the 4 steps that we can take? If we embrace these lessons, what are the 4 steps that we can take to get to this next normal of customer experience? I believe it's about demonstrating genuine care and connection, deploying customer-first design thinking, deciding what redesigned experience model is right for your business, and then being able to deviate from the plan with agility. Here's what I mean. When I talk about genuine care and connection, this is what is the culture, what is the default of how we operate as leaders, the default of how we operate as an organization. And what I'm recommending is that the default, especially in the circumstances we find ourselves in right now, is to think first about our employees, their concerns and needs. Now, I realize that we might not be able to meet all of our employees' concerns and needs, but we have to have a mindset that's thinking about them first and looking at what we can do to minimize the impact, that what we can do to enable and equip and prepare them for whatever might lie ahead. The next piece of this is going and proactively offering support to our customers and thinking about their medium, long, and lifetime value in mind. And one of the things that I've watched a few, not many, but a few organizations quite publicly make the mistake of is thinking incredibly short-minded in some of the decisions that they're executing on, and thinking very reactively to what's happening. Instead of taking a moment back to breathe and think about what are the implications, what are the impact on our customer base, and what are the things that we can be doing to ensure that in the medium and long term and for their lifetime, that they remain engaged, that they remain feeling valued, and that we truly do care about them. This is one of those circumstances where we are discovering what brands are focused on just selling and marketing to us, and what brands genuinely care about enabling us as customers, enabling us as societies to truly be productive, to truly remain connected. And the other piece that we can demonstrate in this idea of showing genuine care and connection right now is to also extend that care beyond our customer base, and to look into the communities in which your employees live, the communities where you're working, the communities that you might be serving halfway across the globe, and looking for opportunities to care for them. That's the very first part of moving forward from the circumstances that we're in right now, is focusing on cultivating genuine care and connection. Once we've gotten that baseline, this next place that we move to is this idea of customer-first design thinking. Here's what we know, and Sonia shared some of the stats around it. We know that over the past 2 months, the fact that people have been at home working remotely has accelerated their willingness to adopt digital service options because they've had to. It was one of those things that models predicted it would by this year or this year or this year, assuming nothing like this. Well, this happened. And so the reality is that we are in this place where digital service options, you've now got customers who've adopted them and are trying to think about, how do I proceed if this is now the next normal for me? How do I proceed with leveraging this as a communication option? We now see this idea of what was once convenient is now a necessity. And one of the big challenges for businesses right now is answering the question of how do we bring business to our customers' homes? Because here's what I know. I know that for some of us, and maybe even many of us, we will be looking for an opportunity to leave our homes. But I know that for others, there will remain a reluctance, there will remain a reticence, there will remain a permanent shift in what they choose is worth leaving home for. And as a result, some of us, depending on the segments, depending on where we serve, we are going to be in this place of having to figure out, what does business look like to bring business into our customer's home? And for those of you that are offering brick and mortar or physical service locations, what we are going to see as a result of this is contactless as an increased customer preference. And so just 2 days ago, I was talking to the CEO and founder of a very large men's clothing company, and they're a completely e-commerce model. And he told me that they were actually looking at launching brick and mortar stores this year. Now they've postponed that for at least 2 years. And they're looking at how do they take their current operations and make sure that they're truly equipped and prepared to handle what's coming over the next few months, but to be rethinking what that in-store, what that brick and mortar physical experience will look like in a few years, as people will increasingly be looking for touch-free experience. So when we go from that idea of customer first design thinking, that then takes us to this place where we have to figure out what is the experience model that's right for our business. And I think what's going to be very, very interesting is that we've been in this place, especially for contact center, is that it's really been about watching cost. It's really been about expenses. And what we are seeing right now with the economic impacts is we know the default for many businesses will have to be, in some cases, those decisions based off of cost and based off of savings. And this is where it's an interesting, the way that this shift has happened, because you can actually have both savings and not have it to be at the sacrifice of the customer experience or customer satisfaction, as we look at what has happened with the adoption of digital channels. And we found that even companies that might have been reluctant to work from home, there was an interesting quote from Gary Vaynerchuk a few weeks ago who said that if you'd have asked him a couple of years ago, he would have told you he could never imagine working from home. And now that he's experienced it and see it perform well, he's an advocate of work from home. And so we're seeing customers who were maybe reluctant to digital channels or digital offerings, now that they've had to experience them, are willing to accept them. And so this is a great opportunity for us to, as organizations, look at where do we find that balance of delivering a great experience, but that also the economics of it makes sense for where our business is right now. For some of you, as I mentioned, you might be taking the approach like the retailer that I mentioned I was talking to, about reimagining what that brick and mortar strategy looks like for you. And whether that's a decision of having to move away from it completely, or just reinventing what happens, right? This is one of the decisions that needs to be made based off of what we're learning right now, and how we want to, in some cases, take calculated bets on what we think is going to be best for our business and best for the customers that we serve. And the other exciting part, which for me is, as someone who thinks about communications all day, every day, is what we're seeing now is this shift that even prior to the past 2 months, the team at 8x8 and I, we've been really talking about, is this point of communications moving beyond a utility. We just thought about what the way communication used to be treated and the way we thought about our phone bill or something, along these lines, to now where we look at game nights and happy hours and all the experiences that we're having through communications. It's now not just about a utility, but it's how we've had to rethink and redesign our experiences. And I think this is going to be an incredible shift as organizations look at their communication stack even, and the way that, whether it's through video chat or other offerings, the way that we enable our customers and our employees to connect and collaborate with each other. And then the last piece is when we've gone back and we've shown that genuine care, and we've taken the step to make genuine connection, and when we've put kind of customer first design thinking on, and then as a result, we've made a decision on a redesigned experience model. The next piece, and this is what I think one of the biggest lessons for us in the midst of this circumstance, and one of the most important things as we move forward, is to be able to deviate from the plan with agility. And I believe that there are 3 key things that are going to enable us to be successful as we think about the next normal. Number one is businesses increasingly will need to make sure that they have a real-time pulse on customer preferences. And for me, having run customer experience teams, one of the best ways that I've used this is through analytics and making sure that I have insight into my data in one place, that it's easy to see no matter what channel people are on, what feedback is coming in, how volumes are changing, what trends we see, to make informed decisions based off of that. The second piece to this is to make sure that we're engaging our front line in regular ongoing conversation, that we're getting their feedback, that we're understanding what they're hearing from customers, what they're seeing in their actions, and that we're inviting them in to ideating on evolving the experience. And the very last piece is, I believe that this entire transition for every organization was a lesson in what it means to rapidly innovate and iterate. Because for many of us, we had hours or just a few days to look at how do we take our operations and remove everyone from the office and serve customers who are unwilling or unable to leave their homes. And I do believe that we're going to continue to see more of that, of the norm of we've got to be able to move agilely, because the businesses right now that are truly kind of thriving and would say they've gotten past this place of surviving in the midst of the current circumstances are the ones who are quickly and agilely able to make these shifts to how they had their team structured, to how they connected with their employees, how they connected with their customers, and to how they redesigned their experiences. So with that, Sonia, I'm going to turn it back to you. Those are some thoughts on what I've learned, what I've experienced, and what I think it's going to take for us to get to this next normal of customer experience.
That was great. That's a good story too. And I love the parallels for just being able to take a situation that is maybe not so great. And there's just a lot of parallels. That was really good. Thank you, Justin. We do have some questions from our audience and some stories. I think you inspired people, and that's exciting too. So that's great. Some of the stories we heard are around things that people have been doing. So customers are sharing some of the things that they have done. Here's one in a financial company, and they had a client who was given, due to the economic slowdown, they couldn't afford the contractual license fees that they were starting at that beginning of the year. And understanding where they were coming from, they waived the license fees for the year and postponed the contract until the year after. But what they did in return is they just asked that they co-market with them, since they're much better at social media and branding and those types of things. And the customer was happy to share that that was a good success and a win-win for both companies, and it created a stronger relationship for them going forward. So I'm hearing a lot of these types of success stories, from shifting business models, shifting delivery models, like you had mentioned, shifting even maybe your value proposition. Like, my husband's in hotel management, and right now the only people that can stay in our county are essential workers. So hey, why not advertise to essential workers? It's a great time to come up to the county and get the essential work done for the county, and do this touchless check-in like you mentioned, and those types of things. So kind of shifting your value proposition, rather than reaching to tourists or something.
And one thing I'll say there is internally, this is actually a really great opportunity to drive change management. So often one of the challenges we have with any change, as someone who was a consultant for a while, right? One of the biggest challenges that I heard from my clients is everyone's so used to doing things the way that they were, right? We were all comfortable, and situations like what we're in right now, when you have this massive forced disruption, people recognize that moving forward isn't going to be the same as it was, and there's going to be a need to change and improve. And so it's a really great opportunity for us to be having those conversations, and you're going to see that people are going to be more willing to embrace change right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the things that you've learned really deviating from the plan with agility. What are some other things that you've learned from the coronavirus, Justin?
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things for me, right, my perspective is that of someone who's been a remote employee for a really, really long time. And now you've got people who maybe had one idea of what remote work was like, who now have gotten to live the, remote work dream or nightmare, depending on who you ask, over the past 2 months. I think one of the big lessons that I learned, that I believe that this has exposed for us, is really the overall challenge with work-life balance that we've kind of faced as, frankly, I think it's a society. And I think that's been exaggerated a little bit by, we also can't have any of our social plans. So not only do we have nothing to do, but we have this natural tendency to fill the gap with work. And one of my observations in this is that when I've seen things like this play out in the past, is some bad habits that maybe kind of quote unquote acceptable right now will creep their way back as we find our way into the office. And so one of the things I would encourage us to be mindful of is, if we are feeling late at night with sending emails right now, realize that when we go back to the office, right, the pendulum is going to have to swing back to some semblance. And so I still think that's going to be interesting. And I think the other piece is that the other lesson is that our default, and this is true for the teams that I'm working with, as well as pretty much everybody I've talked to, our default is to fill our space with meetings. Right. And our days might have typically had a little bit more white space. We might have had some different planning or productivity time, but we have now become so meeting centric as teams that I'm hearing, all sorts of reports of video fatigue, of meeting fatigue. And again, I think the big lesson is, we may have made the shift, but if this is something that we are going to have to sustain for a long time, there's still a way for businesses to go on really getting balance and workplace productivity right.
Yeah, were you guys surprised by the stay-at-home restrictions, and how did you guys as a team, I know you were already home, but how did your team respond to that?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So I look back, for me, one of the line in the sand dates was February 27th, and I remember so one of the things that I do is work with our social teams, and we were watching just the trend line in the United States for coronavirus. I mean, really blew up that day. What was interesting in the couple of weeks prior to that, 8x8 had actually started to, in a lot of ways, because we all use the video, the phone, all of our systems, we use it. So we wanted to test it to see, we thought that organizations might have to move to work from home. We never imagined it would be at the scale. We said, what would that test look like if we started sending our workforce from home? And so we started with a few teams, and then we grew those teams that prior to the stay-at-home orders being in place, we had actually had about a 2-week test already where our entire workforce was at home. So for us, there were things we had to do as it then became mandatory. But in a lot of ways, our platform was built for this. It really became a test for us of, how well it was built for that. But as a team, we were kind of ready to make the move. I think the biggest surprise for any of us is, how long this has now been going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned like rapidly innovating, and I think that's one of the inspiring things that I've seen businesses doing and just people in general. We also had a comment from one of our advisors. He kind of shared a story from one of his customers. He said that he had an attorneys group that he was working with, and they were really hesitant to move forward with a solution that they were looking at because of the coronavirus. And so fortunately, they did move forward, and they went home and sent everybody to work from home, and they got a client within a 24-hour period, and that the litigation for that customer paid for the service for a year many times over. So in other words, had the customer decided, we're not going to move forward with this and not had any solution plan, they may have lost out on that opportunity. So I think it's not always a good fit for every organization, but a lot of times it's important to stay the course. And like you said, how can you be of service maybe to your community at that time, or come up with other ways to kind of give and to be a part of the community and to share. Another question that we have is around generations. I think the sentiment here is that maybe millennials and Gen Z are having no trouble with this, but maybe an older generation, maybe baby boomers, are more face-to-face and are frustrated with the new way things are moving. Do you have any comment on generational interaction with unified communications and different things like that, and how that's sort of showing up in your world, Justin?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And prior to working in technology, from about 2012 to 2018, I led research and content and community for the International Customer Management Institute and HDI, which started as the Help Desk Institute. And one of the studies that we had been doing throughout my time there was understanding this piece, because as someone who fits in the kind of the tail end of the millennial generation, right, often there's this like visceral response to like, you know, all of these things. And so here's what we found out. And we had done this massive study is, first off, every single one of us, doesn't matter what our age are, is we are all social creatures. And every single one of us, depending on where in the world we grew up, the family that we grew up in, have different affinities. And what was interesting for us is that, you know, you could see someone who was maybe in the Gen X or the traditionalist, which was, you know, when we first did that study was kind of, you know, the generation that now is completely out of the workforce. You saw that there was still this willingness to adopt and in some cases exhibit incredible proficiency. Here's what I'll say. So right now I've got 3 kids and they are digital natives. Digital native is different because there's a different level of familiarity. But to get to this idea of a touchless business and, you know, who easily adopts and who craves face-to-face, I would argue the point that we are actually hardwired to crave face-to-face interaction. It's part of the science even behind like why video is just blowing up right now is what happens when we see another human face. Like we are hardwired that way. And it doesn't matter how old we are. I believe that what we are going to see across generations is that we are going to be more particular about who we are or are not willing to give face-to-face time to. That is what I think is going to change, at least in the near term, right? Our circle of trust might be the first people that we're, you know, I think about this, like I'm a hugger, right? I think about this idea of like, what is it going to mean? Like, who are the first people that I'm going to actually, you know, gonna trust myself to hug? And who are the people that like, I'm going to give them the elbow for a while that I would have never thought of that before? I think that's going to be a very real thing, right? Our intentionality around face-to-face and touch, I believe is going to transcend generation. That's something that's going to be, we're all going to have to navigate that. It doesn't matter, you know, what our age is.
Yeah. Well, this is good. I do have some more questions around your solution. Could you just answer where's your customer service located? Any other little details about 8x8?
Cool. Yeah. And one of the things that, I'll mention is we'd love to have conversations with anybody after the fact. So either,
Perfect.
they can don't hesitate to reach out to me, and just 8x8.com is our website where, we've got a number of things that are, resources and videos that are available, to me. So here's kind of my take on what got me as someone who 2 years ago would have sworn I would never work for a technology company, because that place of being vendor agnostic is very interesting, right? I got to write for a lot of the providers in this space. I worked with a number of them on content initiatives, and fundamentally, here's what stood out to me for 8x8 as someone who really kind of wanted to understand the inner workings of how people connect and how people communicate. To me, one of the biggest things was just the technology and the proprietary technology around even fundamental things like how we route calls and how we make sure that information moves from one thing to the next. I think about when I ran my contact center, and end of the day, the thing I was on the line for is whether or not we could pick up the phones, whether or not we could connect on a chat. And one of the things that stood out to me for 8x8, frankly, was that ability to make sure that they had the best voice quality in the industry, to make sure that, the infrastructure that they had in place would assure those like business necessary things, right? The things at the end of the day, people get hired or fired for based off of the decision on who they go to with, right? Those types of decisions,
Right.
Fundamentally, that those foundations were in place. Beyond that, look, I have used every contact center solution that is on the market right now. I've used every phone system. I've used every chat. And when I look at our app and the fact that all of those things are in one app, all of my communication, like I've never lived in an app the way that I live the communication. And to me, that's the most transformative part about it. When I think about like, what's different, what do we do? Like, that's it. As far as support, we've got teams around the globe. We're a global organization. And so it really enables us to provide that level of service based off of where our customers are, so that, if we are serving a customer in, say, APAC or Singapore, one of those, that we've got data centers and we've got distributed around the globe. So the quality that they have is going to be the best quality in region, where a lot of providers, they might ping your phone call or your message halfway, you know what I mean? Like it's who knows where to get you connected. So like some of those fundamental things were really what stood out to me. The way the technology is built, the fact that it really is one single technology, and that the quality and the stability of the system are really second to none.
Yeah, no, it's super great. We use it ourselves. So yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of questions about what the features and benefits are, and I think those are great questions to kind of reach out to. In fact, that kind of segues into our closing here. So the way we work at Technology Source is we have a 3-step process. The way that process works is you work with our strategic team, one of our advisors or partners, and you'll have a conversation where we'll go over your needs and learn what those are. The next thing we do is we get expert recommendations, and we give you those warm introductions to service providers like 8x8. And we have access to really, really great deals and tools and wholesale pricing and all the different things that you're going to really enjoy being a client of us, working with our sourcing as a service process. And then the last step in the 3-part step is to purchase directly from those service providers. They work directly with you and deploy the right solutions for your business. And then hopefully kind of repeat that again and again, because we're not going anywhere. We've been around for 20 years, and that's really our focus. That'll, I think, close us out today. I really appreciate your stories and your energy, and very inspiring. And we're so happy that, we had you here today with us, Justin.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Sonia, and thanks for everybody who joined.
Thank you. And thanks, Tom, and thanks, everybody. I know there was a lot of people on this, so thank you so much for sticking through and learning with us.
Thank you, Sonia. We appreciate
you.
it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Join us every Tuesday from now till May at 10 a.m. Pacific Time for the Technology Source Virtual Roundtable Series.